What's happening, guys? The real Corazon back for a new video. This week's video will be on the magnificent Steins Gate. Now, Steins Gate was originally written in 2009 by Yomi Sirachi. Now, 2 years later, an animation company saw the potential and finally turned it into an anime. The animation company was indeed White Fox. Some of you may know who that is, some of you may not. Regardless, it's a pretty good company, and yeah, they just took it from there. So, like all my videos, the first half will be a non-spoiler section giving minor details about what the anime is about, and then the second half will contain spoilers talking about a few things I would like to share. So to begin with, the overview of this anime is based off of, time travel. So they basically accidentally create a time machine, and then they come and run into all these different problems when it comes to hacking other people's systems and emotional distress, and it's a whirlwind. It's kind of like the butterfly effect, where if you change one thing, it changes the complete outcome of any events to follow. So that's pretty much the overview of this anime without giving too much detail away about what exactly happens. So the first category we're going to talk about is the main character, because as I've said before, it's hard to have a really good anime without a really good main character. Now, the main character in this anime is Corazon. He's quite strange, and right from the beginning of the first episode to like the end of the first episode, you're like, huh, this guy's kind of weird. I don't know if I want to continue watching this. But if you give it a chance, you tend to, really connect with him in an emotional level, and you really start feeling for him, especially past episode 12, which I recommend you all watching too. Anyways, Corazon's a very weird, eccentric, living in his own world. There's a lot of ways to describe him just because he's so different from most anime characters that we see. He's not your, like, super cool or strong or whiny main character. He's, like, very weird. Having said all that, I do think he's a really good main character. I do like two other characters on the show better. Having said all that, I will give him an 8.2 out of 10. I'm going to try to make my ratings very specific so we get a very specific rating at the end, and it's easier to compare anime to anime. But overall, he is an 8.2 out of 10. I do love him, but there's just other characters I like more. The next topic we'll be speaking about is the side characters, and this is, for me, where it really shined, because Corazon's a very good character, don't get me wrong, but my personal favorite character was a character named Corazon. She's the redhead in the anime, and she is, like, one of the most kind, caring, hard-headed, but like genuinely good people that I've seen in anime. Overall, I think she really propels Corazon forward. She pushes him to the limits, and that brings me to the next person who does kind of the same thing, but they're two different, characters in general. They just have different personalities, which is my Yuri. She has the famous line that goes doo doo doo. And like, I think everyone just genuinely loves her because she is just a sweetheart. She's very nice. She's just one of those people you meet in real life and you just can't dislike. Now, my Yuri is part of one of the main problems in this anime, one of the main conflicts. I will not give that away, but people tend to favor her in the anime for favorite girls. I personally prefer Corazon, but I have no issue saying that she is a magnificent character. Now, the next character is Hashida. This is the main core of the group, but there's essentially a team of lab members, and this is the main four. Hashida is... I like him. I'm not crazy about him. I think he's good for the show and what he has to do. He's kind of like their mastermind techie guy. But there's not much to say about him. He's just chill. I mean, in Steins Gate, he's just a regular character to me. But overall, for side characters, I'm gonna give it an 8.8 out of 10 just because I love the two female characters so much. So the next category we'll be talking about is the animation. The animation company is White Fox, as I stated earlier. They are also very well known for animating Re:Zero, Goblin Slayer, and Akame ga Kill. And then alongside that with Steins Gate and a few other animes that are decently popular, but those would be the main four that, in popularity at least. Now, the animation for this is, it's a while back, so like you can't compare it to newer animes. So for its time and for the anime it is more than sufficient. It doesn't blow my mind, having said all that, but it is solid and it's good, and there's no complaints from my end. So for that, I will give it a 7 out of 10, which may seem kind of low, but 7 out of 10 is 70%, which is quite good if you ask me. The next category is indeed villains. Now, this doesn't really have a pronounced villain. It has, a couple, but I would like to call it more conflict, and we'll call it conflict for the video because I don't think villain, you try to overcome a villain, you try to overcome conflict, so it's relatively the same thing depending on what anime you're watching. The conflict in this anime is something that really gets you thinking. because you really try to put yourself in Okarin's shoes and think, man, what would I do in this situation? Now, I'll cover exactly what I mean in the next half of this video, but the conflict is really good in here, and it really hits home. It really gets you emotional, and it really, makes you feel for Okarin, and makes you want to, help him in a way, even though obviously it's just an anime, we can't do that. However, it is this is tough. I'm going to give it an 8.5 out of 10, just because there was a few things from the villain aspect that I feel like they could have made better, but in terms of conflict, I thought it was really good. Now, here comes the most important category, which is indeed the story again, like The Promised Neverland. This story for Steins Gate is one that is very unique and one that we have never seen before, and I doubt we will see again. I personally haven't seen any popular animes that have sufficiently written a story that is anywhere near to as efficient as Steins Gate. I mean, that was a little wordy, but this story is magnificent and I truly do love it. The thing I will say to you people is that the beginning of the anime is a little hard to follow. If you can get to episode 12 and, enjoy those first 12 episodes, then you're gonna love the second half. I dropped it a couple years ago on the first episode because it just didn't make sense to me, the first episode. Get past that episode. I'm telling you, it'll be worth it. It's super confusing, but it's one of those animes that ties in the first episode with the last episode. So just pay attention to it. Pay attention to those, first few episodes in general. You really have to be thinking and have to be understanding of exactly what's going on in order to fully understand the anime. So story-wise, I thought it was brilliant. That first episode and last episode being put together like that. Magnificent. So story-wise, I'm giving it a 9.7 out of 10 just because it's something we don't see very often and it was very well put together. Now, before I tell you what the final rating is, I want to add something a little extra. The proper way to watch Steins Gate is to watch Steins Gate up until episode 22, then you watch Steins Gate 23B, and then you watch Steins Gate 0 entirely, which is another 25 episodes, and then you come back to Steins Gate and watch the last 3 episodes, so 23, 24, 25. That is a proper way to watch it, although when it originally came out, Steins Gate 0 wasn't even released yet, so theoretically it makes no sense, so it was technically meant to be watched as it is. But if you want the whole backstory and more understanding of exactly what's going on when you reach episode 23, I highly recommend watching Steins Gate 0, or do what I did. I simply watched a summary review video on Steins Gate 0 instead of watching another 25 episodes. I've heard it's not as good, and judging by the summary, I would assume I can honestly say it's probably not as good. So if you want to do it like I did, it's shorter, it's quicker, it's probably, I don't know about better, but you watch a summary review video on YouTube or whatever, explaining everything that happened in Steins Gate 0, and then you finally finish the anime. So this is the rating part of the video where I rate the anime out of 100. So for the main character, I got an 8.2, side characters 8.8, animation a 7, conflict an 8.5, and then the story got a 9.7. And you multiply that number by 2, and you get an 84.4% out of 100%, obviously. 84.4 is just slightly higher than The Promised Neverland. I do, however, think The Promised Neverland will pass Steins Gate. It's only had 12 episodes. But having said all that, Steins Gate is really an amazing anime, and I suggest all of you watch it if you haven't yet. And this marks the non-spoiler section of my review video. So stop now. I highly recommend it because the next part will, talk about some things that I would like to talk about. So yeah, if you stayed this long, guys, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe if you will. I appreciate everything, and turn that bell on. Yeah, we're being like YouTubers now. Okay guys, this marks the spoiler side of the video, so if you're still watching, please shut it off if you don't want to see any. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is that first episode and the impact it had on the last episode. I was expecting more, if you want my honesty, because all my friends were like, hey, make sure you pay attention to that first episode, make sure you pay attention. And there was a shock value on the second last episode, I think it was episode 24, where you find out Okarin is the one who kills Kurisu, and for us viewers watching that, you kind of expected building up to it, but when it happens, you're kind of shocked. And I was expecting more tie-ins to that per se from the first episode, because other than just seeing her dead, there's not a whole lot we really need to take from that first episode. Other than like a few noises that were made, or the metal upa, because we find out that the plans didn't burn because the guy had a metal upa, he stole it, yada yada yada. Anyways, so the first episode, although it was good, I believe it should have tied in more to the last episode. Now the main thing I want to talk about is putting myself in Okurin's shoes, and it brings upon a question that I feel like a lot of people's been asked, and that is, who do you save? Potentially the love of your life, which in Okurin's case was Kurisu, or your best friend, which in Okurin's case was Mayuri. And I've juggled this in my head. It's like, who do you save? You know, these are two people you genuinely care about a lot. Now, I'm not going to say who I'll save because I genuinely don't know, but if you have an answer, I would love to hear it in the comments below. So, this anime I really appreciated because it really made me put myself in the main character's shoes, and it made me think, man. Like, honestly, it just made me think a lot about, you know, real life situations. Now, of course, a time machine probably won't ever be made, at least I won't make a time machine, but in a scenario like that, it's like, wow. And then, like, there was several, you know, things that happened that really made me almost tear up in a way, because it's like, this guy's going through all this pain, all this suffering, because his best friend Mayuri keeps dying, and you know, it's the timeline. Like, unless he's on the beta line wave, and in that beta, she dies every time. She's gonna die, you know, and there's nothing he can do, and you see him just like crying and yelling and screaming. He's like, he needs help, but every time he, you know, goes back to another timeline, nobody knows. He's the only one who carries thoughts over and carries memories over from other timelines. So he's basically in this alone. And every time, you know, he has to explain to Kurisu, and each time, you know, beautifully she believes him and she tries to help him as much as she can. But as much as she helps him, at the end of the day, Mayuri keeps dying and he becomes numb to the pain. Imagine seeing someone you care about die like 25, 30 times. And then eventually you just become numb to it. You're like, wow, I've seen this so many times, it barely does anything to me anymore. So it's like, it's one of those things where you really feel bad for him. And shouts out to Kurisu for constantly believing in his story and believing that, you know, they did time travel, you know, and the whole concept of it. Imagine someone just coming to you and be like, hey, I just time traveled and Mayuri died. Now in the anime it's a little different because, you know, they send emails or whatnot, but it's just one of those things where you really need a really like a person who just genuinely cares about you and believes you for that to happen. Now I want to talk about the butterfly effect a bit, because the way they did it was quite interesting, because it wasn't so much that like something changed, you know, something changed in that timeline. They just went to a whole new timeline. So realistically speaking, it confused me a little bit, because in a sense I was like, so did Okurin just, you know, exchange with another Okurin, or was he part of just, or is this just one timeline that it's more like a butterfly effect where you change something and then, you know, the events to follow completely change. But in the way that they explained it, and in the way that Steins Gate Zero worked, where we're following a completely different Okurin, I believe that Okurin was just jumping into different timelines in general and replacing another Okurin who was already there, which is a weird way to do it. And I think the way that works is that they're all connected in one. So when he carries over those memories over, he also remembers stuff that happened in that timeline that maybe shouldn't have. And it's very intricate. It's very weird. It's very hard to understand it fully, the time travel aspect. At least for me it was. If you want to leave any comments to what I'm saying, please feel free to. Again, this is just an opinion. But I'm just going to end off by saying Steins Gate is one anime that I wasn't expecting to be emotionally tied to, and that I ended up being very emotionally tied to. So it has that aspect, which I can really appreciate, because it takes a few longer. Animes like Your Lie in April are also like that, and it's just one of those things that, like, if you have an emotional tie to it, you generally just like it more. Anyways, guys, if you watched this part, I know it wasn't as probably in depth as you were expecting. I just want to talk more about theoreticals and the emotional aspect of it. But yeah, if you come this far, I want to thank you for watching. I appreciate your views. I appreciate your likes. I appreciate your comments. Anything you do is always welcomed here. Anyways, guys, I gotta go. Thank you. Take care. Corazon out.